Hello everyone, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice. Happy Friday, and we are going to be doing a Christmas card. So this is sort of a watercolor painting video and a crafting video mixed into one. I was really in the Christmas spirit. It is that time for me. I really love Christmas. So I start off painting really early, working on Christmas cards, which I should have started earlier than now, but here we are. So I decided to do a candy cane with a bow on it, and I'm actually testing a new to me set of watercolors. This is the Paul Rubens Gucai set of paints. I picked them up a while ago off of Amazon, and like a lot of products, they come in rotation for testing and reviewing, and I'm just getting to these. I'm painting on a cellulose ready cut watercolor card. This is the Masters Touch Fine Art Studio. It's okay. I mean, it's nothing like painting on 100% cotton paper, but it does the job. Now, I started off mixing my darks here, and I'm using from the little travel set that you see up top there. I was using the Payne's Gray. I mixed it in with what seems to be the ultramarine color from this Paul Rubens set. All of the information on the tubes and the packaging is pretty much in Chinese, and I haven't taken the time to translate it yet. I will get around to doing that before I get to the review for these paints. But at this point, all I can do is just kind of call the colors based off experience. And into that Payne's Gray, I mixed some ultramarine blue. I used that to make the shadow. And I have the tendency at this point in my painting journey to go in and put my darks in first. It's become a habit at this point, and it really helps me to gauge where my midtones should be or what they should be. So that's just a painting technique that I've grown to use without even thinking about it, in all honesty. So after I got the shadow down, I decided I did want to put a background in it. So I pulled out a really big, I think it's like a number 10, maybe a number 12 synthetic squirrel round. This is the Lindsay Wyrick set of brushes from Craft Ammo. And I wet the entire background. And now I'm going in with what I think to be the yellow ochre from the set. I went in with a little bit of what would probably be more like a grass green or emerald green color. And then I'm going in with what should be more of a cerulean. And I'm putting them in really watery washes. Now, this Gucai paint is sort of like a hybrid. So you can get watercolor effects, you can get gouache effects with it. It's really interesting set of paints, and I do think it takes a minute to kind of get used to painting with them. So I gave that background time to dry, and I grabbed my set of Creative Mark Cezanne watercolor pencils, and that's what I'm going to use to put in the stripes on the candy cane. Now, I was actually looking at a couple of different reference photos, some on Google Images, some on Unsplash. So my eyes got twisted looking back and forth. So the stripes on this candy cane are going to be a little weird, but when all is said and done, I think the kind of weirdness adds to sort of the realness effect of it. You guys will get to see what I mean. So there you'll see I was kind of erasing because I really couldn't figure out which way I was going to be running the stripes on that candy cane. So I just kind of went with it, what felt right. And in the end, I think it's going to turn out okay. I'm going to go ahead and throw the color into those stripes with the actual watercolor pencil that I'm drawing them on with. Now, I normally tell you that you want to try to keep your colors consistent across the composition. That way you can keep harmony in the painting. Here, I'm trying to use colors that are as close as I can to each other from the different products that I'm using, because this really does turn out to be more of a water-soluble mixed media card versus just using the paints. Because I am going to use the paints, I'm going to use some watercolor pencils, which I told you were the Cezannes. I'm using a little bit of Payne's Gray from that old travel set I have up top, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's Mission Gold. Or maybe it's Marie's Masters. I can't really remember. And then I'm also going to be using some Masters Touch Fine Art Studio water soluble colored fine liners in order to do some line work. So it's a mixed mesh podge of water soluble products to pull off this, but you use whatever you have, even if it's just straight watercolors. Now my camera cut off on me, didn't realize it, so that's why you saw sort of the jump in the video there. But at this point, I'm just using the red watercolor pencil to put in the red stripes on the candy cane. And just like with the green, I'm actually going ahead and coloring those stripes in. And I'm going to be using the pigment from the pencils for that. I think I'm going to actually go back in and use those pencils in dry form on top of those stripes to add some depth and some roundness. Now, I've told you guys before, when it comes to watercolor pencils, you do not necessarily have to add water. You can use them in the quote-unquote color pencil form, especially if they don't smudge. Or they don't smudge a lot, which is really cool. I love a twofer, as I call it. So here I'm just really basting in, well, not basting in, I'm sorry, but dispersing the pigment from the watercolor pencils. And while those stripes are wet, I'm kind of taking the pencil and putting some darker marks in it. Because you sort of see that in candy canes or in candy around Christmas time, where it's lighter and darker tones inside the candy, especially if it's like a striped candy. Now I'm doing the exact same thing with the red. I'm dispersing the pigment, then going back in with the pencil just to add in a couple of darker stripes. Using those watercolor pencils on wet paper is going to make a darker mark, and it's going to be much, much harder to blend out. I wanted to work on the shadows a little bit more here, so I grabbed the gray watercolor pencil, which is the original pencil I used to kind of sketch the outline. And I'm using that to just kind of sharpen up the shadows, add a little bit more pigment to it. And then I'm going to grab my synthetic round brush and blend that out. I wanted to make sure that the shadow diffused as it moved further away from the base of the candy cane. Now I'm just going and starting to work on the actual bow. This one is going to be done with the paints, and I'm actually going to be using a Masters Touch Fine Art Studio watercolor fine liner to add in some of the darks for this. So I'm going in with the same green that I used in the background in that Ready Watery Wash, and I put it down the first layer in a watery wash again, gave it time to dry. Now I'm going in painting directly from the pan, trying to get my mid-tones in, so more saturated color. And this is where this hyper paint starts to move away from being more like a watercolor and move more into the area of being like a gouache, because the less water you use in the paint water ratio, the thicker and the more opaque and the more coverage the paints are actually allowing me to get. And I love that about these paints. I do wish they were a little bit more saturated when they were really watered down, but you can't have it all. And for all intents purposes, for this first time out the gate painting with them, I think that they are working really, really well. So I'm just using that paint directly from the pan to build up saturation, to build up color, shadow, depth, make the ribbon sort of look like maybe it's waving just a little bit, or maybe folding in on itself just a bit. So I'm just going to hem and haw and play back and forth with those shadows. And I'm really just going to do the lightest tone and the mid-tone with the paints. Now, I did actually take that green and mix a little of the blue that I put in the background into it to try to darken the saturation of that color. And I'm using it to go ahead and start to put in my darks for the ribbon, just so it can start to have some shadow and depth and start to take some form and formation. Making sure to touch the inside of the ribbon where it folds over on itself, so it would definitely be much darker in saturation and tone than, say, the top of the ribbon where the light would be hitting it. Now, excuse me. I just took that paint to put in like the little folds right around where the bow ties, and then I'm just darkening in those perimeters around the V in the actual ribbon tail on both sides, right up under where the knot meets the ribbon, because that would definitely be darker with shadow. So basically, I'm just, going through and touching up my shadow colors, continuing to darken that green as much as I can with the blue. The thing about it is, because there was more of a cerulean than, say, like an ultramarine, it didn't really necessarily darken as much as I would have liked it to, but it did do an okay job for like maybe secondary shadows. So then I grabbed that Master's Touch Fine Line Studio water-based fine liner, which is basically a fine liner with water soluble dye based ink in it. And I took the darkest green that I had in this set, and it was actually really close as far as hue is concerned with the green that I used from the paints. So I feel like it blended really, really well. And it worked out well with me using it to add in the shadows. So you see that I'm going to go in and I'm just really going for it, really adding some depth to the outside where the ribbon, excuse me, where the bow forms, and all of the places where the shadow would be the deepest at the tail, at the very, very tip of the tails on the ribbon, just wherever I felt like it needed more shadows and more dark at this point. The reference photos that I was looking at back and forth, I was no longer looking at them, and I was just kind of going with what I felt. I grabbed the green watercolor pencil again because I wanted to add a little bit more saturation and color towards the very ends of each one of those stripes and down the side to encase the color, just so to have a little bit more saturation. And then I did the exact same thing with the red pencil as well. They work pretty decently as regular color pencils, and it didn't have to grab a color pencil set. Now, I took the gray from that same water soluble fine line marker set that I used the green to shadow the bow with, and I use that to go into my shadows and just add a little bit more saturation in the shadow directly under the candy cane where it would be touching the surface, just to make it lift and raise a little bit more. After that, it was time to jump in and start adding highlights to the bow. And I started in with a Derwent Color Soft pencil. And then afterwards, I started to finish my highlights up with a white gel pen. Now, you can also use like bleed proof white. You could use white ink tints. Any opaque white would do. I'm going to draw a border to offset the white that's under the tape, and then I'm going to actually remove the tape, sign the composition. After that, I'm going to grab some stamps and move into the very small crafting portion of this. And then that's going to wrap it up. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Share the video because sharing is caring. Jump in the comments section. Let me know what you think. You can please subscribe. And if you're new or returning, and check the video description for all of the relevant links. The Facebook group, Etsy, Patreon, all those great things. And remember, as I always say, just keep painting and crafting.